Hi, Dr. H here again with family-centered parenting. Today I want to talk about an issue that really affects children of all ages and a dilemma for parents, and that's about kids and money. Wow, money. Some people say money makes the world go round and whatever, and depending on our values, let's face it, money is important, and how we talk about it and deal with our kids about money is very important. So, excuse me, let me remind you that you have to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. If the values you practice will carry more weight than the values you preach. So what am I saying? If you want your children to approach the issue of wealth and money and spending, they have to be consistent with what you're doing as a parent. Parents who place a great deal of value on material possessions should not be surprised that their children have the same values. So we have to come to terms with that and look into our own selves and say, what are my particular values as an adult about money, and how am I modeling that with my children? The next thing that comes up, and often I've heard, is the issue of allowance or payment for chores. Now, I'm not going to say there's one right way. There really isn't. But I want to go over the pros and cons so you as a parent will make your own decision. The question is, are chores part of the responsibility of being a member of the family, or a job to be compensated for? Now, I tend to lean with, you're part of a family. In our family meetings, we have discussed what chores are expected. You had some input in deciding, but at the end of the meeting, we come to an agreement what your chores are. You're not doing it for money. You're doing it because it's your responsibility to the family. The same way the parent who cooks, the parent who cleans up, the parent who washes the dishes, the parent who does the laundry. They're not getting paid for that. They're doing that as part of their responsibility to the family. They're taking their children to activities. They're supporting them in their organized sports. They're not getting paid for that. It's part of who we are as a family and what we do for each other. So that's why paying for chores, regular chores that we've all agreed upon that are necessary as part of the family for a child to contribute, I tend to not like to pay for those chores. Now, if something extra came along, an extra project, something around the house, something to do, they need some work that's not part of their regular chores, and you want to compensate them for that, then I think that's not unreasonable, because that's above and beyond their normal responsibilities. So, payment is part of teaching about life, and at work you contribute, and your contribution to the family is an important lesson to learning responsibility. So compromise. I think there should be an allowance, and that allowance should be regular stipend to help your children, give them some spending money, talk about saving, and trying to teach them responsibility for saving. But the chores, I would only recommend compensating children that are for chores that are above and beyond what has been negotiated in a family meeting. Now, again, this is opinion, not absolute. There are families which do pay children for chores and only give an allowance based on that. If they've explained it to the children and there's an understanding, I'm not going to say that's wrong, but I just prefer having the chores be part of normal responsibility to the family and only pay for something extra, but on the same token, that there's a regular allowance based on their age and living situations where they might have an opportunity to spend money on a daily basis. If they don't, how to save money. These are all products of having an allowance. Setting limits for spending when parents have the means. How to say no when it is not an issue of affordability. And that's key. Now, if you're in a financial position as a family where you're fairly, well off materially, income is strong, you're able to live a good life and make purchases, what are your real values in materialism? What if your son, maybe a teenager, wants a vintage pair of Jordans? Now, could you afford it? Technically, yeah. If you want to spend $150 on a pair of sneakers, athletic shoes, okay, you can afford it. But is it necessary? What message do you send? Are you sending to your children? So you decide. It's not wrong or right, but be consistent. If you want your children to have certain values about material possessions and ownership, you're going to have to, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to have to model that. And it's especially difficult when you do have the means. If you can afford to lease a new Mercedes every 3 years and it's sitting in your garage or driveway, and your child says, gee, Mom, I'd like a new pair of designer jeans that cost $150, and you don't feel like spending $150, it's very obvious your kid could send and run back to you. But you can afford it. You got a brand new Mercedes in the driveway. It costs a heck of a lot more than a pair of jeans. How do you answer that? And that's important for the families that are fortunate enough to have the means materially. How are they going to answer that? So, family values on materialism, maybe a predetermined budget based on allowance and other negotiated criteria. Children monitoring their budget, a savings account, a debit card, when cognitively it's age appropriate, or mandating savings and even charitable contributions if that's part of your family values. I'll give you a personal example. Many years ago, when my children are younger, particularly my boys, and it was time to get new sneakers, and we go to the mall, and I'd say, here's what I'm willing to contribute. I'm willing to give, I don't remember terms and depending on the time, $40, $50 of my money as a dad, family money, for a new pair of sneakers. If you see a pair of sneakers that you want that's more than what I have set as the budget amount, and you have money in your allowance and your savings that you want to use to that purchase, then you can do that. In other words, I'm teaching them, one, what the limits are as a parent that I'm willing to spend. Two, they have to make a value judgment based on their own money on how much they want to spend in addition to get a particular item. And it was a good lesson, and it worked well. Also, how to communicate with them when finances are a problem. Let's face it, there's layoff, there's illnesses, and children will know that there have to be cutbacks at home. Decisions have to be made. Sometimes you have to move to lower your housing expenses. That's tough times, and it happens. How do you communicate that? First thing is try to be reasonable in your reassurance that, yes, we've hit a stumbling block, but on the family we're going to manage. And share with them some of the things, steps you're taking as a family to manage the situation. Yes, while dad's looking for a new job, mom's going back to work part-time. That's an example to supplement our income. We figured we could lower our expenses by putting off a family vacation. We were thinking about buying a new car, but because of what's going on, it's a good idea we put it off. So explain that. Obviously, the older the child, the more you can go into detail. So there's reassurance. Be honest, we are hitting hard times. Something, beyond our control has happened to make finances an issue, but we're going to manage. We have a plan. So avoid some of the financial discussions between parents in front of children. That's not reassuring. You go to your child with the decisions that the two parents make. But if parents are going back and forth, and it could be heated a little bit about where to cut back, whose responsibility, that should be strictly parent to parent. We do not want that feeling of security in the family. We don't want that damaged, especially during hard times. So as parents, let's keep our discussions about options to ourselves and only present to the children a unified front when we've come up with a plan. Also, older children need the facts, but, be optimistic without sugarcoating. And that's a fine line. Kids know, an older kid is going to know what's going on, an adolescent. You want to be honest about what circumstances are hurting the family's financial apparatus and means right now. But at the same time, be optimistic without being pie in the sky and just saying, don't worry, everything will be all right. That's not good enough, especially with an older child. Be optimistic and say, Dad and I, or I'm working on some things. We have some ideas. I think we're going to get out of this hole. It'll take some time. We're all in it together. And so I go about your business, and I think we're going to be all right. And that's a more reasonable approach. I'm going to throw in another factor with kids, and now we're talking about a whole other issue, is adult children returning home when they can't afford to live independently. And frankly, in our society, this is happening more and more. And partially because housing is so expensive, it is very difficult for a young person starting out in a career to afford their own housing and that, or circumstances, maybe they're between jobs, they haven't found one yet, and they need to come back home. And again, a big issue is going to be money. And I've talked about that in a separate workshop. And just remember the 3 R's when it comes to adult children coming home. That is the role, what role each person is going to play. Rules, what are our rules in the home that we will discuss and negotiate now that you're back in the house. And finally, when it comes to the money, resources. What are you going to contribute to the household now that you move back? Till you get work, maybe you have a part-time job, maybe you are working but don't have enough. But what's your plan for saving money so that you can afford a security deposit for your own apartment, whatever. But all these need to be proactively discussed before the adult child returns home. So I'm going to close and just remind folks that the issue of money, wealth, how we spend it, and our values about that are a very significant point in bringing up our kids. And again, the family meeting, which I talk about all the time in our family-centered parenting, and a plug for my book, Family-Centered Parenting, Your Guide to Growing Great Families, my website, familycenteredparenting.com, where you can contact me for an initial free consultation about parenting. Anyway, remember those resources and the really powerful function of good family meetings to handle some of these issues, and money is certainly an issue that needs to be discussed at length as our children grow and develop and their needs change. So for now, take care, and we will be seeing you again. Bye-bye.